By now, we've all seen the opening weekend numbers for the Marvels, and, well,
crashed and burned, huh, Mav?
this was as predictable as a sunrise, of course, but the usual suspects simply wouldn't listen, and they're not going to listen now. Still, I wanted to take a few minutes and poke through the wreckage and take a look at what the kids love to call cope, as Marvel and their paid shills and pathetic stand accounts try and square the circle that was this unmitigated disaster, and explain that as long as this continues, we're just never going to get anything better. See you on the other side. So, the Marvels raked in a whopping $47 million on opening weekend at the box office domestically. To put that into perspective, the Edward Norton-led The Incredible Hulk movie made over $55 million in 2008 dollars, and that was as the second movie in the MCU really before anyone had any idea what was going on. This is a monumentally bad opening, and it'll drop 60-70% this weekend for sure, and that's being kind. This movie will be lucky to crawl to $200 million total domestically. And you're probably about to ask, but baby, how come? I was told the first Captain Marvel movie was a gigantic success. It made $11 gajillion and it made Captain Marvel a household name. Did it though? It's amazing, really, that this needs to be repeated all the damn time. But yeah, the original Captain Marvel made $1.13 billion worldwide. That's true. But, and let me just throw this out here, do you think that could have had anything to do with it being sandwiched in between Avengers Infinity Wars and Avengers Endgame? Maybe, just maybe? Were the people who were left sitting on the edge of their seat at the end of Infinity War not made to think that without seeing Captain Marvel they'd be lost for the finality of the Infinity Saga? It was released between two of the most anticipated movies of all time. Now, I don't begrudge Disney for doing that. Hell, that was smart. I fault people for not listening to the dissent, and there was plenty, and it was vocal. Disney was too wrapped up in the box office numbers as an excuse to show it must be good, instead of listening to fans. Thing is, all they needed to do was look at merchandise sales for the movie and they could have seen Captain Marvel toys collecting dust on shelves everywhere. There was very little organic interest in the character or movie. Ticket sales were massively inflated because of the position of the movie between the two Avengers films. This was knowable information. Why didn't Disney act on it? Instead, they've done the opposite, and since then the MCU has taken the exact path Kevin Feige said they would, ushering in as much diversity as possible, because you gotta get rid of those straight white men, and you've seen the box office numbers decline. As this has happened, we've had to hear creatives blame these same straight white men for their toxicity, and for not supporting the products which were now no longer being made with them in mind. Somehow in their minds they'd convince themselves that altering things fans loved, changing the source materials, insulting fans if they dared complain, wouldn't eventually affect ticket sales. As my grandmother used to say, you get more flies with honey than vinegar. Well, then I'd piss her off and ask why anybody wanted flies, but you get her point. It's a terrible plan to not give customers what they want and then double down and insult them when they dare complain about it. The reasons for this inevitable failure have been obvious. Marvel killed off or otherwise retired heroes fans had grown to love, or who were the most popular with comic fans. And in their place, they brought in heroes that never resonated with anyone, but who fit the new criteria for being diverse. Keep in mind, none of this was organic either. Marvel was telling fans that they were doing this to virtue signal. Had they just worked in heroes from different backgrounds here and there and actually made good movies, it would have been fine. But this was Marvel force-feeding medicine down people's throat. It was being done for our own good, we were told. And nobody likes that. On top of the forced diversity and the removal of heroes people actually cared about, the content became preachy and terrible. It wasn't enough to just replace male heroes with female ones, but all male characters needed to be knocked down a few pegs in a lame attempt to elevate the new female leads. And of course, the female leads have all too often been nearly perfect. Hell, Captain Marvel is the perfect example of this. Think about it for a second. Tony Stark had to overcome his narcissism and grow as a man to fully become Iron Man. His arc took the entirety of the Infinity Saga. Thor, too, had to be knocked down, literally, and had to earn his powers back from Odin. Steve Rogers? Hell, he didn't have powers. It was his innate worth that made him worthy of earning them. Banner had to learn to control his. Peter Parker had to learn that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Every great hero does something similar. Without that, they wouldn't be admired. It's their overcoming adversity which makes them great. That's ultimately what people gravitate towards. Well, what did Carol have to overcome? Well, the patriarchy who'd convinced her she wasn't as powerful as she really was. So she was always awesome, but once she broke free, she was awesomer. And to be clear, while this is obviously an attempt by the creatives to appeal to women in general, even most women find this offensive. Almost no one likes perfect characters that don't have to overcome anything. Overcoming true adversity is part of what makes an engaging hero's journey. Every time they do this, they lose audience, and they refuse to see it. And when it comes to female characters, they've decided they get no journey, because to suggest women aren't perfect as they are is anathema to them now. Instead, they hide behind the idea that the movies are great. It's the fans' fault. Were it not for these mean old men who hate strong women, they'd be killing it. When they're told that's stupid and that men have always liked strong female characters, they just scoff. It's been fun watching this reaction in real time for this movie. When the same excuse got tossed out on Twitter this week, the common retort for non-idiots was, well, then what about Wonder Woman? Men like that. In response, you'd get gems like this. Or you get absolute horseshit like this. In case anyone ever tells you you're wrong, think back to examples like this. When I say Disney and most major studios stop caring about being entertainment companies first, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This movie is a disaster, any which way you look at it. And yet, you've got people going to these lengths to try and spin it. Because as I've said, they don't care if this movie loses money, so long as their activism remains intact. This was the worst opening in history for an MCU movie, and yet it's seen as a triumph for this group because of intersectional politics. I've said it a ton. The Disney machine only produces one thing now, and the Marvels was the product they've been dreaming of. Almost no men, cast dominated by people of color, written and directed by a black woman. It is everything they've wanted, except, being good or making any money. And since they have no interest in hearing that maybe concerning themselves first with their representation and diversity goals long before trying to create the most entertaining products probably isn't the best bet, this'll continue indefinitely. Also because rather than looking into a fucking mirror and genuinely wondering what's happened, they're more interested in casting blame at everyone else. Hell, someone in the comments from my Marvels review actually blamed me for why the MCU will ultimately die. My favorite, though, has been the desire to suggest that the reason the movie tanked is because of the Screen Actors Guild strike and the actors being unable to promote the movie up until a few days before. Yes, that's what's happened. What this movie needed to lure in the very fans these same people routinely call toxic was more Brie Larson on shows like The Tonight Show and Jimmy Kimmel, or Nia DaCosta on The View talking about the importance of representation.
Get the fuck out!
Them being sidelined likely helped the movie's box office in this case. You know you've reached rock bottom when you start hitting excuses like this.
Terrible, take a lap.
This is the Marvel Cinematic Universe today. More specifically, it's Disney now, which owns Marvel and Lucasfilm in addition to their own stuff. And so long as they refuse to acknowledge what we all see, this will continue. Despite what these idiots claim, none of this makes me or guys like me happy, really. Sure, I love watching the wrong-headedness and ego of these people drag them down, but as far as the movies and TV shows, no, I'm a fan. Fans don't want to hate these things. The passion that makes someone a fan in the first place is why they take these things so seriously. And it's why they can ultimately make $2 billion for a movie with people in tights. Disney doesn't want to own this, but as Peter Parker learned, this is a tremendous amount of power they have being the caretakers for our childhoods, and lately they've been irresponsible with it. And in the case of the Marvels, they've been made to pay. Until next time, thanks for watching.